Welcome to the Chess Channel, the channel where you can learn loads. The last game we covered was Maggie's game against Mills, a game that lasted relatively short. If you wish to tap into it, we can provide the link, which should appear on the top right of your screen any second now, and here it comes. There are way shorter games played in this year's Olympiad, but before we can look at any single one of them, just a quick word on some very basic statistics. Round 1 in the men's section produced 731 games, and in the women's we had seen 628. This is what was scheduled, but since some games that were not played are additionally included in this calculation, we may want to ignore these. With anyone actually being of playing against anyone, it doesn't matter who you are and how strong you might be. You may easily come to play against the likes of Magnus Carlsen even if you are unrated. There are plenty of unrated players in this Olympiad. Alexander, for example, who represent the Seychelles, is one of many unrated players. There is Robinson, York, Kasongo, Mahomet, Ayad and Harris Yoshi, but to mention a few more. With only 81 draws in round 1 in the men's, we saw most of the game being decisive. In fact, 89% of them led to wins, and who would have expected this? In the women's, this figure was even higher. With only 6% being drawn, we had seen a 94% of games being won, and isn't this something? Excluding games of one ply and games that did not involve a single move, the shortest one took place in round 1 between Ni and Maya, lasting only 4 moves. Other games of 4 moves were also recorded, and we shall be coming back to this point. As a type of compensation for the time we spent talking about this, we shall be looking at more than a single encounter. Let us try and include the shortest games from the event to date. The first game that we will cover is the one between Sofia Röpke of Uruguay, and Anna Barra of the Seychelles. Sofia is LO'd at 1869 and Anna is playing this event as an unrated player. With all the details coming up, what we saw was a game of only 7 moves. What you are about to witness is the Steinitz defense using the 3 knights. Sophia White kicked things off with 1 e4. Anna answers with the usual e5, and with Sophia introducing the kingside knight. This is how Anna responds. So what is happening is that Anna is offering a full pawn, but is there a hope for any compensation? Well, let's see what happens next. Sophia was looking at this juicy pawn, but in the end she is not interested in him. Instead, she developed her second knight. There comes knight number 3 out. And this is what the Steinitz defense is all about, using the 3 knights variation. Via this bishop response right into c4, what Sophia is now looking at is this pawn on f7. How would you handle this position as you see it? Anna could have developed the bishop, but in this instance, she develops her other knight, but his automatically raises a big red flag. With Sophia opting for this knight attack, the only way to stop this assault on f7 is to try this break with a simple d5, unless there is something else Anna is looking to play. What this Steinitz defense presents looks very close to the Italian Traxler. In order to get the Traxler going, this is what you would need to be playing. Just pick up the bishop and place him on this square on c5. However, because of the 1 move difference, the entire dynamics of the opening can change, and in this case, this is not different. Anna wanted to stop the penetration on the 7th, and though d5 would provide some cover, she goes it entirely risky. She saw this knight on g5 being somewhat uncovered, and what she did was to go on and grab hold of this pawn right in the center of the board. Should this knight on e4 come off suing the queenside knight, d5 is going to guarantee something. If you take, and this bishop gets eliminated, when this fork lands on your doorstep, there goes your queen and obviously the game. However, when the pawn in the center came off, Sophia first got rid of the pawn with a check, and when the king made his escape to e7, this is how Sophia puts an end to the game. It's not a checkmate, but in this point in time, Anna surrenders. So why does Anna give up? What you see here is a mate in just 1 move, but can you spot it? After king d6, not only this knight is next, but this is where the checkmate takes place, and what a way to punish Anna's huge inaccuracies. All Sophia would have used the knight pair and a single bishop to enforce this amazing checkmate. So in short, this Steinitz defense in the three knights variation did not go all the way for Anna. Anna took a very fast turn south, and paid dearly when she took the wrong turn. This was game 1 out of the way. The second game we are going to feature is the game of round 1 between Silveira of Uruguay and Malbric of the Seychelles. It's another miniature using the Greek defense, or some people may know it as the Owens defense. Both are exactly the same thing. Silveira White opens up with an e4. Simone Malbric answers in this way, and for many who are not aware of this opening, this is what the Greek defense is all about. Silveira continued with this push to d4. There comes this pawn to the 6th, and with Silveira introducing her kingside knight, this is what Simone does. Just like the previous game we looked at, Silveira came in with this bishop threat. Simone in turn brings up this response, and with Silveira getting her king to safety, this is how Simone reacts. She is going for a hippo type of opening, but is this dangerous under the circumstances? Silveira saw exactly what needed to be done, but can you see what she is about to do? In just over a minute, she jumped the knight into the rim, and is looking next to use the kingside opening to her advantage. Whatever you choose to do, there are red flags waving everywhere. e6 is something you could try, but when you get confronted by this check, king d7 has to be followed through via this knight repositioning. And you can see the gaps presented with this Silveira initiative. If you close everything up with this response, if you take and take, there are two options you can exercise. One is this queen check to pick up the rook, and two, you can try and reposition the bishop here. If you try and save the rook, rook e1 and bishop e7, how can white proceed? There is so much you can achieve here. Knight e6 has to be it. It looks so innocent, and yet this move is full of venom. Queen e8 to save the queen will simply get you done instantly. How? Once you get in this response, the queen will have to go, and white is looking at no more than a handful of moves before victory is secured. If we return to the original position of the game, Simone is obviously a novice. What she did here was to go for this move to stop the queen's access into h5, but as soon as Silveira picked up this pawn, this was the point of no return. Malbric simply resigned. There is no point to even look at how this game continues. Novice players often don't have much to offer, and particularly when they are up against much better and rated players. Having said this, Silveira is rated at 1436, but even with such a low rating, she had no problem capitalizing as soon as the opportunity presented itself. And with game 2 out of the way, let us look at game number 3. Game number 3 has to be the game of round 1 between James of Trinidad and Tobago, and this time she is up against a player we have seen already. It's again Anna Barra of the Seychelles. Some countries have a plethora of players who rush to join the Olympiad, but some countries are having trouble making up their teams. Mills, for example, who we saw in the previous video, was a last-minute entry for Canada, and Canada was desperate in getting together a full complement. Shemelia James is rated at 1590, but let's see how she fares in her game against Anna. She kicked things off with 1e4. Anand responds with this push to a5, and before we go any further, what we are seeing is the Wade defense. This specific opening has its pros and cons. The question you may want to ask is, how far can this opening get you against a relatively strong player? And talking of openings, we have just seen Magnus Carlsen open up with the black pieces against Smirnov, using the Williams variation in the Nimzo defense. Coming back to this game, James answered with this move to d4. And there comes another pawn push to h6, but how unusual is this move here? What James does here was to develop her knight on the queen side, and this is how Anna reacts. Isn't this a clear invite for the knight to get attacked? With James going after in, you can clearly see from how Anna reacts, she could do with some more practice and more training. If you don't want the knight to return to his original spot, you can always return him to this outpost on h7. So, normally it would be one of these two options. And yet, this is not how Anna plays it. She picked up the knight and placed him right here on g4. With this knight being removed in a span of 1 minute and 42 seconds, you know it like Anna was asking for it. It was as if she didn't want to be at the Olympiad and was trying to make a statement. I could be wrong, and that it could be also the case that Anna was not fit for purpose, but it may not matter in the end if she can take something away with her and learn something out of this experience. Coming back to the game, thought James is miles ahead. Anna exercised the only move that gets her checkmated in one single move. This is what she'd done, and from this point on, we can only presume James stood up and simply walked away. This is not certain unless we can review the footage of the game, and this is if one exists. 25 minutes and 8 seconds later, James delivered this check and avoided the mate in one with queen g6. Instead, what she did was to apply this check, but once again she took her time. She basically spent 10 whole minutes and 32 seconds. Right after this move was presented, James finally strikes with the final blow, and the game obviously ended here. It's one of the fastest checkmates in India so far, but should James have skipped that intermediate check by placing the queen on h5, this game would have ended in just 6 and not 7 moves. Okay, this was game 3 out of the way. Game 4 is another female encounter. Do not get confused as to what I'm about to say. This game was between 4 players in 2 different games. Let's bring up the names first and we shall explain to clear any confusion. It's Covelis Alvarado Perez of Puerto Rico up against Kayla Martin of Trinidad and Tobago, and Magnum Celine Pakpali of Togo, who is up against Marie-ange Moustache. What is the chance that you will get to see any game that repeats from start to end? What are the odds here, and can you calculate them? Okay, let's do this, and of course we left these 2 last games for last. Celine got underway with 1 e4. Marie-ange responded with e5. And with knight f3, this is how Marie-ange answers. It's a very interesting response, but how strong or how dynamic is it? Neither of these 2 females are rated, and this is the beauty in any chess Olympiad. So what we see here is another pawn offer. Would you capture this pawn, or would you try something different? Though this push to d4 is a perfectly playable move, Celine was going to capitalize instantly. She went on to get rid of this pawn, and the logical step to go for is to introduce the queen to this outpost. If d4 to cover, after the knight comes under fire, when you retreat this knight to safety, you will get something very similar to the Petrov. Both Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen brought back the Russian when they tried it in their World Chess Championship match. Okay, what we have here is that when this pawn is removed with an incoming check, Queen e2 brings up this game right into some interesting position. Black can respond by either getting the queens to come off or try this alternate bishop move into f5. We saw nothing like this in this game. No queen e7 was played, but Marie-ange goes for yet another pawn push. Said actually correctly, Marie-ange pushes the same pawn from c6 to c5. Doesn't this lose an invaluable tempo, and if so, can Celine convert? Celine has bishop c4 to mount the pressure on f7, but rather than go for such a response, she tried a more direct route. This is what she chose to execute. What we have just seen is a gambit that you hardly get to see. Does anyone know what opening we are looking at? It's the Gunderam Gambit. I can tell you this. This is one gambit you do not get to see every day. The idea is that should you go on to attack the queen, if you take and take, this is what you need. This check does guarantee the rook, and black will always be playing catch-up. Queen e7, queen takes, and queen takes with a check, and the position and situation are hopeless. This game can end in only one way with careful play. We saw nothing like this. After this, queen appeared through h5. Believe it or not, this is how Marie-ange reacts, and of course the last move we no longer need to apply. And of course when Celine delivered the checkmate, This was not only the shortest game in the Olympiad, but this mate also qualifies as the fastest mate in this event from both sections. A record is a record, and we do need to make mention of it. This very same record was additionally recorded in the game between Alvarado of Puerto Rico against Kayla Martin, and it was done in exactly the same move order as we saw here. A 4-move checkmate is achieved by two different players in the women's section in round 3 and round 4 respectively. There are many surprises happening in this Olympiad, and is true to say absolutely no one is safe. In the meantime, I hope to return later with more updates, but at least for the time being, we have witnessed the fastest checkmated accomplished in just 4 moves, not once but twice. I hope to see you shortly. So until that time comes, God bless and many thanks for watching.